آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم انفعنا بما علمتنا وعلمنا ما ينفعنا. اللهم زدنا علما إنك أنت عليم حكيم. اللهم اجعل هذه المحاضرة حجة لنا لا حجة علينا يا رب العالمين. أما بعد. Today, inshallah ta'ala, we're going to continue in the book that we've been covering, Zaad Al-Mustaq'ni, the book of Salat. The book of Salat. Today, inshallah, we're going to be starting the chapter. The chapter, Bab al-Shurut al-Salat, the conditions of the prayer. The conditions of the prayer. Before we get started, does anyone know any of the conditions of the prayer? You have to be in wudu. All right, what else? Face the Qibla. What else? How many? What's the total number? What's the total number? Anyone know? Huh? 6? Okay. Anyone else? 5? Okay. So the scholars of Islam, they differ. Some say it's 6 and some say it's 9. All right. Before we get into it, I'll explain to you why in a second. Before we get started, the first thing is, what is a condition? When they say shurut of salat, the conditions of the salat, what does that mean? The prerequisites. Excellent. So are they're called prerequisites. So what do you understand by that? It has to be done before the salat. It has to be done before the salat. Right. What's the difference between shurut or conditions of the salat versus the pillars of the salat? Are they the same? Excellent. One is before, meaning the conditions are before, and the pillars are in the actual act of worship. Are we clear on that? Is that clear? All right. So now we're going to, actually, this will be our last class and for a couple weeks because one of the scholars is coming into town, so he's going to be taking up our days that we teach on. So we're going to cover a nice portion today, and then we'll pick up in a few weeks, inshallah. The first thing it says, if anyone has the book with them, you know your book? The first thing it says, شروطها قبلها منها الوقت. All right. The conditions are before it, meaning the conditions are before the act of worship. The conditions are before that act of worship. وَمِنْهَا, and from those conditions are, the first thing they mention is al-waqt, meaning the time. So we're going to cover a large portion of today's class. We'll be discussing the time. And it says, وَمِنْهَا الْوَقْتِ وَالطَّهَارَةُ مِنَ الْحَدِثِ وَالنَّجِسِ. Now, obviously, before a person prays, they must have what? Wudu. They can't have any impurities on their body and their clothing. In the place that they're praying, it also has to be cleansed. Right. When we mentioned that some of the scholars differ as far as the conditions of the salat. Some say it's 9, and some say it is 6. The ones that say that it is 9 is because they are mentioning 3 things that are conditions for almost every act of worship. And that is Islam, aql, and tamyiz. Islam, a person being a Muslim. Aql, meaning they have the proper sound mind. And tamyiz, meaning they're of age that their act of worship would be accepted. Those 3 conditions are almost present in any act of worship. This is why some scholars say that it's only 6, because they don't include those 3. They don't include those 3 because it's common. It's commonly known, right? So the first thing that we're going to talk about is al-waqt, meaning the time. So the author, he says, فَوَقْتُ الظُّهْرِ, and we need everybody to pay attention here. Before we talk about it, or read about it. We're going to talk about it first. What time is anyone familiar with Salatul Duha? What is Salatul Duha? Does anyone know? No one? I'm sorry? No, Salatul Duha, not Salatul Dhuhr. What is Salatul Duha? Right. Salatul Duha, we're going to cover this when we get there. Salatul Duha is a prayer after Salatul Fajr once the sun comes up. There's a prayer from once the sun comes up all the way up until Salatul Dhuhr. Right? Salatul Dhuhr, how do we know when Salatul Dhuhr comes in? Does anyone know? When the sun reaches what? When the sun reaches its pinnacle. So we're going to look at this here. This here is considered a shakhis, right? A shakhis is something that's straight up in the air, right? So if we were in a location and we don't know, we don't have the time, how would a person know when Salatul Dhuhr is in? How would you find out? You take something like this, a shakhis, right? Something that goes straight up in the air, right? When the sun reaches its highest point, is there a shadow? Yes or no? It is? Yeah. When the sun is straight up above your head, is there a shadow? Is there a reflection? No, it wouldn't be. Right? So the sun rises from the east or rises from the west? He's the only one who knows. The sun rises from the east. And it sets where? In the west. So when the sun rises from the east, right? And it goes straight above your head. And then as it starts to go to the left or towards the west, there begins to be a shadow. Right? Salatul Dhuhr comes in when you begin to see that shadow. And Salatul Dhuhr stays in until that shadow reaches the equivalent of whatever stick or whatever you use. Does that make sense? So then, if the sun is in, if the sun is above our heads and there's no shadow, this time here indicates a time that it is impermissible for us to pray. So between Salatul Duha and Salatul Dhuhr, there's a time that we cannot pray. That time that you can't pray is when there's no shadow, when the sun is immediately above your head and there's no reflection. As soon as that time passes and you begin to see a shadow, what side would that be? So if the sun is rising from the east, right? So the shadow is going to be on your what? On your left side, right? Right? The west side. Yeah, right. When the reflection starts to come on the east side, on your right side, that's how you know that Salatul Dhuhr just came in. When you see a reflection, you can even use your body. You might see a small shadow. All right, Salatul Dhuhr stays in until the shadow reaches the equivalent of this. So whatever you put in the ground to signify the shadow, that's how long the salat stays in. Does that make sense? Did I lose anybody? We're not going to talk about the prohibitions right now. Oh, go ahead.
Because it's in between the two horns of the shaitan. That's why it's prohibited to pray at that time.
Okay.
That's what I was asking.
We don't want to talk about that right now. We'll talk about that later because there's a whole section about that. That's what I'm saying. I only mentioned that to show that you can't pray then. We'll talk about that later in detail. Right now, I want us to understand about Salatul Dhuhr, when it comes in, etc. Okay? So Salatul Dhuhr. Salatul Dhuhr comes in when what? When you can see the shadow. All right? So when you can see the shadow, up until when exactly? You see the length of this? The length of this pencil, for example, if you were to put this outside around Salatul Dhuhr and you see the shadow goes up until it reaches the top of this pencil, that means Salatul Dhuhr is almost out or out. Does that make sense? Okay. When does Salatul Asr come in? Salatul Asr comes in when it exceeds the length of this. And this is why it's called the shakhis, meaning you put it in the ground. Once the shadow exceeds the length of this, all the way up until it becomes double. Once this becomes double in size, that means Salatul Asr is out and Salatul Maghrib is coming in. Is that clear? Like, somebody said no? What's not clear?
I think he said it's clear.
Oh, it is clear. Okay. Right. Salatul Asr, Salatul Maghrib comes in when? When the sun sets? Yeah, when the sun sets, right? But when the sun sets, sometimes you don't know when the sun sets. So what does it look like in the sky? Ihmarra, meaning the sky begins to turn red, right? When does Salatul Maghrib go out? Say again? When does Salatul Maghrib leave? When does Salatul Isha come in? When it's completely dark. So what that means is, for Salatul Maghrib, you can look in the sky and you'll see it red. It'll be red for a while. Then eventually the blackness from the sky will cover that redness and you won't see the redness anymore. When that redness is gone and the sky is completely covered in black, that's when Salatul Isha comes in. Salatul Isha, and many of the scholars mention that Salatul Isha, it stays in up until Fajr al-Thani, the second Fajr. Did anyone know the difference between the first Fajr and the second Fajr? No. Like, what's the first Fajr? Does anyone know? What is it? What's the difference? Like, if you're looking outside, how do you know when Salatul Fajr comes in? Does anyone know? When Salatul Fajr comes in, there's going to be a thin line of light. And it's going to go from east to west. It's going to go like this. And you're going to see it crack a little bit. And maybe not in the city. Maybe if we're out in a place where there are no buildings, you can see the distinction. Right? This is the second Fajr. Meaning, this is the Fajr that we have to get up and pray. The first Fajr is, they call it Fajr al-Kadhib, meaning the lying Fajr. It's not real. What does that look like? Instead of the light being from left to right, it'll be north and south. And you'll see a light, and then it'll disappear. Is that clear? Right. All right, so now we're going to read through it, and then we'll stop at it and cover it again, inshallah. All right? قال المصنف رحمه الله تعالى. He says, فوقت الظهر من زوال إلى مساواة الشيء. He said that Salatul Dhuhr is from when you see the shadow up until the equivalent of its size, right? فيئة بعد في الزوال وتعجيلها أفضل, and praying the Salat in its earliest time is best. إلا في شدة حر, except if it is extremely hot. If it is extremely hot outside, then we should not rush to pray. Rather, it says, limada. Why is this? Because there's a hadith of the Prophet, alayhi salatu wasalam, where he says, abridu, meaning pray the Salat when it's cooler. So if it's really hot outside, they're saying you should delay it slightly until, because you remember, we said when Dhuhr comes in, where's the sun? It's almost at its highest peak. So he said, let it calm down a little bit closer to Salatul Asr if it is extremely hot. However, those are not our conditions nowadays because we don't have to pray outside. We have masajid, we have buildings, we can go in with AC, etc. So we generally don't run into that problem now. And he says, وَلَوْ صَلَّى وَحْدَهُ. He says, so even if a person is praying dhuhr. And it says, even if he prays it at his earliest time, even if he prays it by himself, oh ma ghaymin liman yusalli jama'atan. Or if they delay the salat to close to Salat al-Asr, if it's cloudy outside, then this is also better. If it's cloudy outside, then you can delay it because it's cloudy outside, etc. It says, وَيَلِيهِ وَقْتُ الْعَصْرِ. And after that comes the time for Salat al-Asr. إِلَى مَسِيرَ الْفَيْءِ مِثْلَيْهِ بَعْدَ فَيْءِ الزَّوَالِ. Salat al-Asr, as he mentions, is when it's the length of this, meaning the shadow, and it doubles. Once the double is done, that means Salat al-what comes in? Salat al-Maghrib. For those of you, if this is the first time you're hearing this, take some time during the day, maybe tomorrow, and pay attention. Pay attention to the shadow. Like look at your shadow. See, do it for yourself so you can see for yourself. That's what I did. But Salat al-Asr has two different times. It says Salat al-Asr is waqt al-ikhtiyar and then waqt al-dururi. Waqt al-ikhtiyar, it means we have a time where we can pray Salat al-Asr. Remember when it turns double up until Salat al-Maghrib, right? As soon as Salat al-Asr comes in, we have Waqt al-Ikhtiyar, meaning we can choose to pray it right away. We can delay it 30 minutes. We can delay it 45 minutes. We can delay it, as long as Salat al-Asr doesn't go out. This is called Waqt al-Ikhtiyar, meaning we have a choice when we would like to pray that prayer, as long as it's within that time frame. Is that clear? Right. And this is called Ada'an. So then we have two different types of prayers, right? We have a salat that is considered Ada', which means we pray it in its prescribed time. And then we have a salat called Qada. Qada means we miss the time. So here's an example. Let's say Salat al-Dhuhr is from 1 to 3. Okay? Any time between 1 to 3 o'clock, and when I pray it, this is called Ada'an. Ada'an, meaning I prayed it in its proper time. At any point in time, I pray it at 4 o'clock or 3:30, and it's Asr, for example. It's Asr now, and I didn't pray Dhuhr. When I pray Salat al-Dhuhr now in the time of Asr, this is called Qada'an. Qada, meaning I'm making it up. I missed the proper time and I'm making it up now. Now, if you did that intentionally, you are sinful. If you delay it outside of its proper time, you are sinful. You're also sinful if you delay Salat al-Asr, for example, to the point where we go into another time called Waqt al-Dururi. Waqt al-Dururi, meaning is, let's say, I'll give you an example. Right now, Salat al-Asr, right? Salat al-Asr is from 4 to 5:30, for example. I wait to pray Salat al-Asr at 5:25. At 5:25, the sky is already starting to become red. The orange and redness is already there. That means Maghrib is right there. And if I wait that long to pray, yes, I still caught the Salat inside of Asr, but I'm sinful for that, even though I prayed it in its proper time. Is that clear? You intentionally delayed it close to the time of Salat al-Maghrib. Is that clear? Right. So then the author, he says, وَالضَّرُورَةَ إِلَى غُرُوبِهَا. And if a person delays Salat al-Asr to its obligatory time to pray, then that person is sinful. وَيُسَنُّ تَعْجِيلُهَا. And it is sunnah to pray the salats in the earliest time possible. However, there are some madhabs, like the madhab of Imam Abi Hanifa, they delay a lot of the salawat. They'll delay it. They have their dalil for it. There's a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, where he came to the Prophet. There's a hadith of the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, where the angel Jibril, he came to him and he prayed with him in all of the times that the salat is allowable. So for that, they may use that as evidence in others. But in general, according to the school of Imam Ahmed, praying the salat as earliest time is better. It says, وَيَلِيهِ وَقْتُ الْمَغْرِبِ إِلَى مَغِيبَ الْحُمْرَةِ. And from that is the time of Maghrib until the redness is removed from the sky. Until the redness is removed from the sky. The next author says, وَيُسَنُّ تَعْجِيلُهَا إِلَّا لَيْلَةَ جَمْعٍ لِمَنْ قَصَدَهَا مُحْرِمًا. So this next part here is for those that make Hajj, right? It says, وَيُسَنُّ, talking about Salatul Maghrib. It's sunnah to pray Salatul Maghrib at an early time, except for the one that is making Hajj. For the one that is making Hajj, they must spend the night at this place called Muzdalifah. And they should delay it to pray to pray Maghrib with Isha during that time. That's the only reason why he mentioned that here. Is for the Muslim, the Muhrim, the one that's in a state of Ihram, when they're making Hajj, that you pray Maghrib and Isha together. This is why this is a recommended time to delay it. Another time a person can delay Salatul Maghrib, obviously, is if you're traveling. If you're traveling out of a town and you go to a particular area, you want to, by the time you get there, it's time for Maghrib. It's time for Isha. You can pray Maghrib and Isha in that time as well. Any questions? No questions? You want to talk about the Salat and the horns? We're going to come back to that, inshallah. I ain't forget you, Sheikh. وَيَلِيهِ وَقْتُ الْعِشَاءِ إِلَى فَجْرِ الثَّانِي. And after that, we have Salatul Isha, as we mentioned, once the sky becomes what? Once the redness is all gone and it's dark, right? After that, it becomes Salatul Isha all the way up until Fajr al-Thani. So if you ever read any books of fiqh, and it says something like Fajr, Salatul Fajr al-Thani, or the second Salatul Fajr, everyone should understand what that means, right? So what's the first Salatul Fajr? It's vertical. Yes. What is that called? Fajr or what? It's called Fajr al-Kadhib, the lying Fajr, meaning it's not the real Salatul Fajr, even though you're going to see a light. But that light will eventually disappear. And then after that, we have Fajr al-Sadiq, the truthful Fajr, or the second Fajr. And how does that light appear? Vertical? No. Vertical is up and down. Horizontal. Good. Any questions about that? All right. The first Fajr is called Fajr al-Kadhib. In English, you might just put the lying Fajr. They might call it that. You could Google it. You actually, if anyone wanted to know, you can actually Google it, pull up the images. You can see the picture of it, what it looks like. There's a picture of it. It says, وهو البياض المعترض وتأخيرها إلى ثلث الليل أفضل إن سهل. It says about Salatul Isha that delaying Salatul Isha to the third of the night is better. Why? We have a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ even saying that it's better to delay it ila thuluthul layl in sahula, if it becomes easy, if it is easy. And it says وَيَلِيهِ وَقْتُ الْفَجْرِ إِلَى طُلُوعِ الشَّمْسِ. Salatul Fajr. Then the last one is Salatul Fajr up until the sun rises, or when the sun comes up. وَتَعْجِيلُهَا أَفْضَلُ. And it is better to pray the Salat quickly as opposed to delaying it. All right. So the next thing we're going to mention, once we're clear on the times, right? How do we enter into the Salat? What do we need to do to enter into the Salat? The intentions, but what are you actions? What allows you to enter into the Salat? What action? Takbiratul ihram. Right? So some say, well, why is it called takbiratul ihram? Like, why is it called like that? Right? Why? Some say it's because everything that was before the salah is now haram. Because now you're in a state of salat. All right. So when you enter into the state of salat, you start off with the takbiratul ihram. So let's say, for example, remember we have two times for the salat, ada'an and qada'an, meaning we start the salat in its time or outside of its time. Is that correct? Are we clear on that? Like, let's say right now it's salatul dhuhr. A person, uh, a person prays salatul dhuhr. No, he didn't pray salatul dhuhr. It's about to be salatul asr next 2 minutes, and they didn't pray salatul dhuhr. They say Allahu Akbar. As soon as they say Allahu Akbar, boom, they call the adhan for salatul asr. Is that salat considered ada'an? Meaning, did he make it in salatul dhuhr or is it in salatul asr? Huh? He made it for salatul dhuhr. Why? Because he made the takbir. And once he made that takbir entered him into the salat in his time. But he's sinful if he did it intentionally. If he did it intentionally. Does it make sense? Right. If a person, right now they call their adhan for salat or asr, he's like, dang, I didn't pray dhuhr, Allahu Akbar. Is this considered ada'in or qada'in? Meaning, is he praying it in his time or is he making it up outside of his time? No. He's making it up. Yeah, he's making it up. Right. The next one says, وَلَا يُصَلِّي قَبْلَ غَلَبَةِ الظَّنِّ. So now we're going to come up with a scenario. We're all Muslim, alhamdulillah. We're traveling. We're going to a place we don't know. Maybe going to a different country somewhere. Right? You're visiting some brothers there, right? And it says, وَلَا يُصَلِّي قَبْلَ غَلَبَةِ الظَّنِّهِ بِدُخُولِ وَقْتِهَا. Right now, you're in another country. You're not sure, like, dang, is it dhuhr or asr? I'm confused about the time, right? So it says, if you don't know the time of the salat, there are two ways of finding out the time. What is it? Okay, so if you look at the sky, you try to figure it out. This is called ijtihad. And what's another way to find out? Huh? Compass? That's still ijtihad. What's another way to find out? Ijtihad means you're trying to figure it out. You're trying to use some tools to figure it out. What's another way to find out? That's still using ijtihad. What's another way to find out? What did I say? I said you're going where? Another country, right? To visit who? Are they Muslim? Yeah, so you're going to visit Muslims in another country. So how else would you, You ask the people that's there. So either you figure it out on your own or you ask the people that's there. The people that are certain about what time the salat is. That makes sense? Or you're going to go to another country. Man, they say it's Lord. I don't believe that, man. It's Asr. I'm not listening to them. No. You're going to listen to them. You're going to ask the brothers or the sisters there what time is the salat. Right. It says, Imma bijtihadin aw khabarin mutayaqqinin. All right. So now we're past that. We asked somebody or we figured it out on our own. Let's assume now that there's nobody around. We figured it out with our own calculations, right? It says, فَإِنْ أَحْرَمَ بِاجْتِهَادٍ. If we said Allahu Akbar and we based it on our own ijtihad, our own understanding, right? فَبَانَ قَبْلَهُ فَنَفْلٌ. And let's say we pray. We think it's time for Salatul Dhuhr. In our minds, it's time for what? Salatul Dhuhr. We use our own calculations. We looking like that. Was it the east side or the west? I don't know. I think it's Dhuhr. So y'all pray Dhuhr. Allahu Akbar. Once you finish praying Salatul Dhuhr, you walking down the street and you come across the masjid and they're calling the adhan for Salatul Dhuhr. What you just prayed, what happened to those prayers? It turns into what? It's invalid. What happens to it? They turn to sunnah prayers. They turn to what? Sunnah prayers. They're not your obligatory prayers because you could not pray the salat until you have the time. So those prayers that you prayed, they become sunnah. Is that clear? So then, and I'll give you another thing here. We can always go from top down, but not bottom up. What does that mean? You can always start with something that's obligatory and change it to a sunnah, but you can't change your sunnah to something that is obligatory. Does that make sense? Do you need an example? All right. So right now we come in, you think you're praying. Right now you started Allahu Akbar with your intention to pray Salat al-Dhuhr, right? And it's just you. So you're praying, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alamin. He said, you know what, dang, I meant to pray my sunnahs. You know what? I'm going to just change my intention and make these my sunnahs. You can do that. You can do that if you go from an obligatory prayer down to a sunnah prayer. Okay? Now let's say you say Allahu Akbar with the intentions of making your sunnah. And while you're praying your sunnah, you said, dad, you know what? Let me just make these my dhuhr prayer. You can't do that. This is why I say top down, meaning you can go from obligatory down to a sunnah, but you can't go from a sunnah up to a obligatory. Okay? So the next thing it says, وَإِلَّا فَرْضٌ. So then, if they finish praying, they realize that they did pray Salat al-Dhuhr in its proper time, then it counts as Salat al-Dhuhr in its proper time. It says, وَإِنْ أَدْرَكَ مُكَلَّفٌ مِنْ وَقْتِهَا قَدْرَ تَحْرِيمَةٍ ثُمَّ زَالَ تَكْلِيفُهُ أَوْ حَاضَتْ ثُمَّ كُلِّفَ وَطَهُرَتْ قَضَوْهَا. All right, this is an interesting issue here, right? It says, if a person in adraka mukallafun, we all know the mukallaf. If a person became of age to pray during the time of the salat. So let's say, for example, a boy becomes baligh. Right now, it's time for Salat Isha, or let's say Salat Asr. We're going to use Asr. Salat Asr came in, he's baligh. He just now realizes, dang, I got to pray, right? So it says, وَمِنْ أَدْرَكَ مُكَلَّفٌ مِنْ وَقْتِهَا قَدْرَ تَحْرِيمَةٍ ثُمَّ زَالَ تَكْلِيفُهُ. And let's say, for example, it's Salat al-Asr, it is 5 minutes left before Maghrib comes in, and he becomes baligh, meaning he has to pray, and then he loses consciousness. The scholars come up with these scenarios for a reason, right? He loses consciousness, right? Or let's say it's a woman, she delayed her salat, right? Salat al-Asr, she said, dang, I'm going to wait and pray Salat al-Asr in an hour. Maghrib is in an hour and 10 minutes. She delays it all the way up until the end. And as soon as she's getting ready to pray, her Menses comes on. Her Menses comes on, right? So her Menses comes on. ثُمَّ كُلِّفَ وَطَهُرَتْ قَضَوْهَا. The guy who, I'm going to go to the first scenario, then we're going to go back to the sister. The first scenario, the guy, he becomes baligh. 5 minutes left, he loses consciousness and passes out. As soon as he gains consciousness, he has to make that salat up that he missed. Why? Because he became baligh during the time of the salat. Likewise, the sister. She didn't pray. She knew she had to pray Salat al-Asr, but she delayed it. I'm chill, I'm gonna wait. I'm busy. I'm shopping. Right? She's shopping. She's busy. Her plan was to pray when she got in the house. I'm gonna pray when I get in the house. Right? She knew her Menses wasn't on all day. She gets in the house. Dang. Her Menses comes on. And the salat goes out. Once her Menses goes off, she has to what? Make that salat up that she missed. Is that clear? Why? Why does she have to make that salat up that she missed? Because she had time to pray it when the salat was in. She had time to pray the salat when the salat was obligatory for her to pray it, and she didn't. She delayed it. She had time to delay it. Is that clear? طيب. It says, وَمَنْ صَارَ أَحْنًا لِوُجُوبِهَا قَبْلَ خُرُوجِ وَقْتِهَا لَزَمَتْهُ. Same thing. وَمَا يُجْمَعُ إِلَيْهَا قَبْلَهَا. So, let's say, for example, a sister's on her menses, and all of a sudden, it's Salat al-Asr. She's been on her menses all day. Salat al-Asr comes. Towards the end of Salat al-Asr, her mens goes off. Her mens goes off when? Towards the end of Salat al-Asr. Does she have to pray Salat al-Asr? And what else does she have to pray as well? She has to pray Salat al-Asr, and she has to pray Salat al-Dhuhr. Limada, why is this? Why? That doesn't make sense. Why does she have to pray 2 salats? And it was her mens went off in Salat al-Asr. Why does she have to pray Salat al-Dhuhr? Because the ulama say, from the Salaf, that they say, fi hal al-udhr, if you had an excuse, let's say, for example, you were traveling, can you combine Dhuhr and Asr? Yes. Can you pray Dhuhr in a time of Asr if you're traveling? They say likewise when a woman, her mens goes off in a time of 2 salawat that you can combine. Is that clear? So let's say, for example, her mens goes off during Salat Isha. Then she could what? She has to pray what? Maghrib and Isha. Because you can combine them. But let's say her mens goes off after the time of Salat al-Fajr. Does she have to pray anything? No. So sisters, beware, pay attention. When your mens goes off, if it goes off during Salat al-Dhuhr, then the only thing responsible for is Salat al-Dhuhr. If it goes off during Salat al-Asr, then you are now responsible for Dhuhr and Asr. If your mens goes off in Salat al-Maghrib, then you're only responsible for what? Are you responsible for Asr or Maghrib? No. Why not? Because you can't combine them. So then she's responsible for what? La. Well, she's responsible for Maghrib and Isha. She doesn't have to make anything up. Meaning, if her mens goes off in Salat al-Maghrib, then she has to pray what? Maghrib. If her mens goes off at Salat al-Isha, she has to pray what? Maghrib and Isha. Is that clear? Do it again. But no, because I'm saying, like, women need to understand this. If a woman's mens goes off, let's say she wakes up in the morning and it's Fajr, and it's like 20 minutes left before the sun comes up, and she realizes her mens is off. Does she have to pray Fajr? Who said no? You said no? Oh, nah. Yes. Yes, she has to pray Fajr. Okay? Let's say she wakes up, her mens is on, the Salat goes out at 7:20. At 7:35, her mens goes off. Does she have to go back and pray Salat al-Fajr? What do you mean, though? All right. Her mens goes off. Fajr leaves at 7:20. Her mens goes off at 7:30. Does she have to pray Salat al-Fajr? Are you sure? Good. Be certain, Akhi. No, because your wife's going to ask you, babe, what do I got to do? Are you good? All right. So now Salat al-Dhuhr comes in. Her mens goes off at Salat al-Dhuhr. What does she have to pray? Dhuhr. Her mens goes off at Salat al-Asr. What does she have to pray? Dhuhr and Asr. Her mens goes off at Salat al-Maghrib. What does she have to pray? Maghrib. Her menses goes off at Salat al-Isha. What does she have to pray? Maghrib and Isha. Easy? Alhamdulillah. All right, let's move to the next one. ويجب فورا قضاء الفوائد مرتبا. All right, so the next issue is if a person misses the salah. Let's say, for example, you were asleep all day, you miss Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, and you woke up at Isha. No, let's say you woke up at Maghrib. You're like, oh man, I slept the whole day. He's looking like, how did that happen? Right? You slept the whole day. All right. It says يجب فورا قضاء الفوائد مرتبا. That it is obligatory ala fawr. Okay, so wajib, the term wajib has different meanings, right? You have wajib fawran and you have wajib muwassa'. Wajib fawran means something must be done right now. You can't delay it 1 second. Wajib muwassa', it means you have some time to do it. So for example, Salat al-Dhuhr comes in at, for example, 12 o'clock and it goes out at 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock. From 12 o'clock to 3 o'clock, this is called wajib muwassa', meaning you have time. You have between 12, 12:30, 12:45, 1 o'clock, 1:30, etc. This is called wajib muwassa', meaning you have time. It's wasir. The time is wide. Then you have wajib al-fawr. Wajib fawran means you must do it right now. There's no delay. So as soon as you wake up and you realize you missed all of these salawat, you must pray it fawran. Fawran means right now. No delay. You make wudu and you start praying. Okay? It says you pray them tartib in order. So the first one you missed was dhuhr or fajr. So you pray fajr, you pray dhuhr, you pray asr, you pray maghrib and isha. Yes.
Okay, you wake up during Maghrib. But let's say you say you had to pray Dhuhr, Asr, Maghrib, pray in order. But is that only if it's still enough time left?
Excellent. So we're going to cover that right now. So you pray all of those salawat. But let's say, for example, let's say you wake up during Maghrib, right? The beginning of Maghrib. You pray Fajr, Dhuhr, Asr. And before you finish praying Asr, before you even start to pray Asr, like, dang, I only got a couple minutes left to pray Maghrib. You must pray Salat al-Maghrib. You can't let the Salat that's in go out before you make up something else. So he said, well, wait a minute. So you telling me I'll be praying Maghrib before I even pray Asr? Yes. Why? Because you can't miss the Salat that's in right now. You caught the tail end, Sheikh. He's like, oh, what y'all talking about? That was good. No, I caught that. Okay. So this says, Walaikum salam.
Does that apply also if it runs into the next day when Fajr come in?
Give me an example.
So you slept through the whole day and then you wake up Fajr the next day. Would you have to pray that whole day over first before, like you wake up after Fajr or before the?
So the same rule would apply. You make up all the salawat, but if Fajr is going to go out, then you must pray Fajr. Does that make sense? Meaning you don't let the salat that's currently in leave while you're making up previous salawat. So that means you prayed dhuhr. You prayed Fajr from the day before, dhuhr, asr. Then it's like, dang, Fajr's about to go out. Then you need to stop what you're doing and pray Fajr for that day, and then go back and finish up the rest of the salawat that you missed. And it says, the author, he says, وَيَسْقُطُ تَرْتِيبُ بِنِسْيَانِهِ. So he's going to mention two conditions where you don't have to pray them in order. He's going to mention two conditions where you don't have to pray the salats in order. The first condition is وَيَسْقُطُ التَّرْتِيبُ بِنِسْيَانِ. If you forget, obviously, then the order, you don't have to keep up with the order if you forgot. That's number one. Number two, بِخَشْيَةِ الْخُرُوجِ وَقْتَ الْاخْتِيَارِ الْحَاضِرَةِ. If you fear that the time for the present salat is going to go out, then you pray that present salat. Is that clear? All right, that's it. That's the whole class for the day. Any questions? Yes.
This is a little off subject, but you said that you I always get confused about was when the sun rises, that's when Salat al-Fajr is out.
When the sun is up, that's when Salat al-Fajr is out.
Okay, so during Ramadan, when is the last time you can eat and drink? When the sun come up or after the dawn?
That's all. What do you mean when the sun comes up?
So
Yeah, akhi, you stop eating when they call the adhan for Fajr, right?
Right. I mean, that's what I do, but I'm just saying I hear different things.
I never. So you hear? So
I heard people. I'm just telling. I heard
No, no,
people
no.
say that you still can eat it till
the sun comes up.
Fajr goes out, which when the sun comes. That's what I heard.
Yeah, that's wrong. Yeah, that's wrong, Sheikh.
But I'm just hearing
Whoever's of the opinion you can eat after you pray Fajr all till the sun comes up, that's wrong. Alhamdulillah, that's wrong. That's not halfway wrong. That's wrong. You don't do that. Yeah, that's all. Because if that's the case, Allah says, "Kulu washrabu hatta yatabayyana." So they use this ayah, and this is why the people who say that they use this ayah because it says hatta yatabayyana khayd al-abyatu min khayd al-aswati min al-fajr. They say eat until you can see that. If you look at the English, it'll say there's threads in the sky till you see the light. But what this is talking about is that Fajr, a thani. You understand? When you see that thin line, it's talking about Salat al-Fajr, coming in, not going out. Yeah, they got it wrong. Yeah, they got a little backwards, inshallah. But any other questions? Yes. Let's say, for example, you missed. So the brother said, one of the exceptions is if you forget the order. So let's say, for example, you missed the whole day of prayer. You got up, you prayed you prayed Fajr. He said, all right, let me pray Asr. Then let me pray Maghrib. Oh, I forgot to pray Dhuhr. In that case, it's okay. Right? If you forgot. Yes. Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes.
Sister want to know, is it permissible for a woman to call the Iqamah for herself before she prays if she has no mu'adhin in the home?
Well, so the last class we did about the mu'adhin, right?
Mm-hmm.
The author mentioned about the adhan and the iqamah for the rijal. It's generally for the men. It's generally for the men. That's it. Any other questions? Tight. Any other questions? So like I said, this is our last class, inshallah, for a few weeks. Sheikh Muhammad will be here next week, and then he'll take all my class time, alhamdulillah. And he'll probably do that he'll be here, inshallah, for a couple weeks. So we encourage everybody to come out, benefit, ask your questions. Things don't make sense, bring them to them. And here's another thing. When it comes to scholars in Islam, we don't worship scholars. And we have to make that very clear. What's the benefit of a scholar in Islam? What's the benefit? Does anyone know? Before we go to that, I'm going to make some comparisons here. What's the benefit of a mechanic? Why do you go to a mechanic? Huh? Fix your car so you can do what? Go on about your way, right? What's the benefit of a doctor? Huh? Keep you up. If you feeling sick, you go to a doctor. They tell you what you need to do to get yourself right, and you're going about your life. This is the purpose of a scholar. Scholar, their job is to help us get us right so we can go on about our life, so we can better focus and better worship Allah. Is that clear? So we don't look at scholars in and on themselves like, oh, this is, we don't do that. Yeah, they're scholars. Allah raised them in knowledge so that they can help us get closer to Allah. Help us understand his book. Help us understand the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ. Help us to better ourselves, and then we go on about our way. Did that make sense? Right. Any other questions? Yes.
Your class on Thursday. I want to be a Muslim. That's still this Thursday.
Yeah. We have that this Wednesday. Yeah. No, Thursday. I want to be a Muslim. So this Thursday is going to. I'm thinking maybe I should cancel that class. No. Inshallah, we'll do. I want to be a Muslim on Thursday, and then that's it. Inshallah. All right. Any other questions? Good. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. Yeah. Oh, you have a question? No, we get back to Dean, inshallah.
How long do you think Muhammad's supposed to be here, you said?
He may be here maybe like 2-3 weeks. I don't know. Try to make him stay as long as we can make him stay.